So hello, everyone on the call. We can see the numbers rising. Before we get started, I guess we'd love to hear where everyone is dialing in from today. So just let us know in the chat if you can. Just pop where you are dialing in from today. I'm in South Africa at the moment, so really enjoying the sunshine. But yeah, love to hear where you're all from. So we have Christian from Belgium. Now we've got the Unmind team in the UK. Got Elaine from Glasgow. Hello, Lauren from Chattanooga and Hannah from Washington. Got a nice global audience today. Hey, Morven from Grand Cayman and Roman from Montreal.
Oh.
So for those of you just joining the call, we just asked people to pop in the chat where you are dialing in from. James from Cork, hello. Hello, Robert. It's great to see you all joining today. We'll give you about another 30 seconds or so before we get going. Hello, Laurie from Houston and Tiffany from New Jersey. It's a great international vibe. Hello, Shauna from Central Nebraska. Elena from Brussels. Good stuff. Okay, so I guess welcome to you all, and thanks for joining our webinar today, People Up, Business Up. And this is presented to you by Unmind and Workvivo. And today we're going to be talking about the business impact of essentially a great employee experience and the integral role that mental health and well-being plays in this. So we would love you to share any questions that come up for you during our presentations and our discussion, and you can share those questions in the Q&A box. My name is Steve Peralta, and I'm the co-founder and chief wellbeing officer at Unmind. And I'm joined today by Gillian French, who is the chief people strategist at Workvivo. So Jillian, it's a pleasure to be sharing the virtual stage with you today. I thought we could start by just you telling us a bit about yourself and your background, and then I'll do the same, and then we can get right into it.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Steve. Delighted to be here. Hello, everybody. As Steve said, I'm Gillian French. I'm Chief People Strategist with Workvivo. I've worked with Workvivo for probably 2.5 years, and I look after the internal and external people agenda. Prior to that, I worked for numerous organizations in the capacity of Chief People Officer for nearly close on 20 years. When I was thinking about that today, I couldn't believe it. But yeah, my background is primarily in HR employee experience, and I've done that for as long back as I can remember. So just to give you a little bit of context as well on Workvivo. Workvivo is an employee experience platform that simplifies employee communication and drives engagement. The purpose of Workvivo is to engage and emotionally connect people in organizations. And it helps people feel included, appreciated, and engaged no matter where they work. So that's Workvivo.
Great. Thanks, Jillian. So as I mentioned, my name's Steve, and yeah, I co-founded Unmind with my colleague, Dr. Nick Taylor, and 2 ex-colleagues just over 7 years ago. And it's been a really inspiring journey since then. So for those of you who don't know, Unmind is a workplace mental health and well-being platform, and we are grounded in science, and we effectively help employees to better understand and proactively look after their mental health and well-being. And we help organizations to create mentally healthy cultures that help people to flourish and help the business to achieve high performance in a sustainable way. So aside from my role at Unmind, I'm also a transformational coach. And prior to Unmind, I spent about 7 years in the corporate wellness space as a workplace wellbeing consultant and a facilitator. And then prior to that, I spent about 7 years in the entertainment industry as a singer and a musician and actor. So quite a curvy career. But throughout the different career paths that I've taken, this idea of human flourishing and expressing one's potential in life has really been a core focus for me. And I think that this is relevant to today's discussion too. So I guess let's get into it, and I will start sharing my screen again.
I like the way you didn't tell me, Steve, before this that you're an entertainer in a past life.
I didn't. No. Okay, great. So we're here today effectively to talk about the vital link between employee experience and business performance. And if we think about it, the modern relationship today between organizations, between employees, it's evolved It's evolved over the decades and especially recently. And it's moved beyond the traditional transactional agreement of the past. Today, I'm sure you would agree, most of us want work to enhance our lives in a more expansive way than just financially, right? And when that happens, research would suggest that we give more back to work. But not just that, it also unlocks our potential too. It boosts productivity and it boosts performance. And central to this is employee mental health and well-being. So studies show that companies who embed well-being in their culture, they are significantly more successful financially, and also better at keeping their people. But when I say embedding mental health and well-being into a workplace, it means a lot more than just, say, offering an EAP to your employees, especially when the workplace itself might actually be causing a lot of the harm on employee mental health itself. And so really what we're talking about here and what's needed is a fundamental reevaluation of work culture and the employee experience, one that focuses on mental health and well-being as a core aspect. Now, when we think about the workplace, we can see that it offers us things like connection and meaning and purpose and growth and mattering and achievement. And because of this, work should be good for well-being because it has these potential ingredients of well-being. But we know that many organizations seem to be failing to harness this potential for both employee and business benefit. And I say that because we know that the prevalence of poor mental health in workplaces is rising, and this is impacting not only employees, but business performance too. And you can see some of the stats here on the slide, with substantial losses in productivity and working days. Now, this obviously involves external causes like the pandemic and political and economic instability and the cost of living crisis, right? But there are also internal factors, I think, things like our beliefs and ways of thinking about work and the values that then flow from that, and then the behaviors that we then engage in based on these values is all really important. And research would suggest that this is particularly relevant for leadership values and behaviors. And so I guess a good question to ask is, how are leaders doing when it comes to supporting employee well-being? So if you were to ask leaders based on Deloitte research, 91% of leaders believe that they're doing a good job and that their employees know they care about their well-being. The research which would suggest, however, that 53% of employees actually believe the same thing. So there's a bit of a disconnect there. There are many employees who do not seem to trust that their leaders have their well-being or their best interests at heart. And so knowing all of this, the question that we, especially leaders, should be asking ourselves is, how can we create an employee experience that elevates mental health and well-being? And I hope we can shed a bit more light on that today. So I think that's a good time to hand over to you, Jillian, to tell us a bit more about this concept of the employee experience.
Great. Thanks so much, Steve. So listen, before we get started, I thought it would be really good, before we delve into employee experience, is to think about the kind of difference between employee experience and employee engagement. I've been involved for this for many years, and I do think there is a crossover, and sometimes people mix up the two. So I think it's good to just differentiate what the difference is between the two. So for me, and from the research and what I've learned over the years, is employee experience is the input and the work that an organization puts in. And the employee experience is essentially how employees internalize and interpret the interactions that they have with their organization. Employee experience is influenced by so many things within the organization. It's like how you hire, how you onboard, how you develop, how you recognize, reward, offboard. And employee experience is relevant to existing employees and to past employees as well. Engagement, on the other hand, is a feeling the employee has for the organization and the connection they feel based on the inputs of what the organization has put in place. Engagement is usually measured in employee engagement surveys, which I'm sure we've all been through and we've all revised over the years. And the interesting thing is that engagement is slowly on the increase. It took a bit of a hit in 2020 and 2021, and we know that, but it's at 23% globally. And I think in the US, it's at 32%. And if you think of best in class organization where employee engagement is at an all-time high, that's at 72%. So the point I'm trying to make is there's definitely a disconnect, which lines up with what you're saying. There's the work that the organizations are putting in, and then there's actually the experience of how employees are experiencing, and there's definitely a disconnect. I mean, more recently, there was a Gartner survey as well. It's more recent than the Gallup survey, and it came out that only 13% of employees are happy with their current employee experience. So there's definitely a gap. But the good news is this slide here, that, you know, we are seeing that leaders see there needs to be an improvement. Back, you know, pre-COVID, it was at about 52% of leaders indicated in organizations that employee experience was important. Now that's at 92% of employers saying that employee experience has moved up the agenda and they're seeing it as more important. So it's really, that's a 40% increase. So it's great that there is that recognition. And then the other part of it is, I think there's a great opportunity within it, because as you see from Jacob Morgan here, you know, companies that invest in employee experience are 4 times more profitable than those that do not. Now, I do think the main reason for this is that employee experience is complex. It's full of a series of things that maybe some are complicated, and, you know, they seem simple, but they're unpredictable. So it makes employee experience a little bit more challenging for organizations. But as I said, there is a good news story here. There's a great opportunity for organizations to make that investment and, you know, improve their profitability.
Brilliant. Thank you, Jillian. There's some questions I want to ask you, but I wonder, do you have any questions off the back of what?
Yeah, I took some notes while you were chatting there. So the first thing I wanted to ask you was the gap between leaders' beliefs and employees' perceptions of well-being support. Why do you think that is? Like, why is the gap there?
Yeah, it's really interesting, right? And it seems like, you know, the gap's not going away. It's recent research backs us up again. I guess the cynical amongst us might suggest Machiavellian tendencies, perhaps, but and I'm not saying that doesn't exist, but I think it's down to the confluence of other factors. I think, first of all, the post-COVID era has been marked by, as we all know, widespread trauma and stress, both in our personal lives and our professional lives. And I think leaders might underestimate the impact that this has, the lasting impact that this trauma has had on their employees. And so while leaders might be focusing on hitting targets and recovering from the economic downturn, employees are still really grappling with the very real psychological and emotional aftermath of the pandemic, right? Which can affect their perception of workplace wellbeing efforts. And I think during trauma and times of high stress, our sense of threat and mistrust is heightened. I think it's a bit of a prime conditions for what we're experiencing here. I also think that leaders can sometimes be detached from the day-to-day experiences of their employees, right? You know, they might not fully understand or see the challenges faced at, let's say, lower levels. And I think this can then lead to like a communication gap. And I know you're going to speak about communication later, where leaders believe that they're doing enough for their employees' well-being, but then their actions or their messages, they don't effectively reach or resonate with the employee experience of things. I also think prior or existing cultural norms plays a role here. So in cultures where there might have been a long-standing norm of, let's say, prioritizing work over personal lives and results of a people, if all of a sudden there's this shift towards employee well-being, then it might be met with skepticism or seen as like insincere or a tick box exercise. So some of that kind of stuff. So there's a few factors, but I think at the heart, there might be this flawed assumption that focusing on results, which leaders have to do today, and truly prioritizing people are mutually exclusive pursuits, and they're not, right? And as a leader, we know it can be difficult to get it right because, you know, there's no cookie cutter approach, and we're often dealing with a diverse group of people with different sets of expectations. And so it's challenging, but I think that's the kind of stuff that we're dealing with here.
Yeah, really interesting. The other, just if I can jump in, I had just another note that I really wanted to ask you. Evidence against the notion that business results in employee well-being. Oh, actually, you just touched on that, as in they're mutually exclusive. I suppose when I think about it, I always think about it like that movie, you know, Indiana Jones, because it's coming up to Christmas, and it's like this step of faith to take off, you know, and he's in there, he says, you need to take this step. I see it as that, because, you know, we have all the stats, we have everything to back up, you know, that by investing in this, you know, you have the positive outcomes. What do you truly think? Is it that leaders, as you said, they're just so used to the culture, or they're conditioned themselves and they don't know how to change? So is it getting them support to change their own personal behavior, you know, in the way of, I don't know, organizational psychologists, or is there how could someone like HR practitioners or leaders that are on the call now, what could they do to maybe move the dial or help with this?
Yeah, again, it is potentially challenging, and I don't want to speak for people, but there was a traditional way of thinking about the role of work and people, and that can be quite set in people's minds as the way we do things around here, etc. I do think that we need to start by leveraging the scientific research and the data that shows the positive correlation between employee well-being and performance. You know, and there's lots of that out there. Some more of which we'll talk about later. And I think you need to speak the language that's going to resonate. I think we need to emphasize the costs associated with neglecting employee well-being. You know, increased turnover, higher healthcare costs, lost productivity, diminished creativity and innovation. And again, we can look at some of the reasons for this later. You know, if we can quantify these costs and make a compelling business argument for why investing in employee well-being isn't just like the right thing to do, but a financially sound one, then I think we can start to make some progress. And then if I think we're being really bold, we can maybe start to adjust incentive structures, right? To reward leaders who successfully balance employee well-being with achieving business results, make that part of their KPIs and so on. Because really change has to start from the top. And when top execs are able to visibly commit to and model this balanced approach, I think it then sets a precedent for the rest of the organization. And I do think there's room for education and training, but a lot of the time people are time poor. So it's a challenging thing, but I think science and making compelling business arguments is essential.
Great, thanks.
Cool. I guess, so staying with leadership. Well, actually, first of all, you mentioned earlier, and I actually touched on how it can be challenging for leaders to get this right because we're dealing with diverse needs of the employees. And you mentioned that there's not a one-size-fits-all when it comes to the employee experience. So given that there's no cookie-cutter approach, can you provide actionable ways, examples of how organizations can actually tailor their approach to better meet diverse needs and expectations of their employees? Because I can imagine it's challenging.
Yeah, no, it absolutely is. And I alluded to it when I said it's complex rather than complicated. And yeah. Margaret Heffernan does a great book and she maps that out and it describes it much better than I can. But it really resonated with me. In my experience, getting your people managers and your leaders right is a very first step. You know, you have to hire people that want to lead and want to manage people, that have a great way with people, that can read the context of the organization and take the context and the context of the person, high, you know, emotional intelligence, relational intelligence, a person that really, you know, eats, sleeps and breathes and understands people. I mean, that would go a long, long way. I mean, there's lots of different things, but as I said, because it's complex, you need a person that can read the context and apply what they, and in good stead, that they understand people and they're a well-seasoned leader of people. I think that's a very, very good step. I think all too often, and you know, and I know, we hire people that tend to be experts maybe at the task, but they really don't. And we only have career pathways for people management, and we don't have expert pathways. And that then results in having people in roles that really don't suit them. So get your people, like, hire hard, get the people managers right. That's kind of the first step. The next one then, and because I'm a HR and I've kind of grown up in HR, you know, for many years, you have to have flexible and adaptable policies. You can't be trying to policy make, and what we tend to do is policy make for the bottom sort of 2 or 3% of people that do things wrong. You know, you need flexible and adaptable policies that can move and grow with, you know, the workforce, and work with the workforce, not against the workforce. So really, really considering your policies are flexible, they're adaptable, and also that you can personalize them and they have that flexibility along with the leaders. I think we have a wonderful opportunity with AI. Because I'm more of a people person, probably not, you know, a techie. I got a little bit nervous when I saw, you know, AI, and I thought, gosh, this could really, but I think is such a wonderful opportunity, and we shouldn't miss it, in the sense that we can take some repetitive tasks that would be within HR, but actually free up people to be with people and to lead the people and do people things to improve the working conditions, and let the HR people and managers actually work with people and do what they were hired to do, you know. So I think it's a great opportunity with AI, and I think if we do it in the right way, rather than implement AI and then let go of all the HR people or say we don't need, you know, these people, we can downsize now that we have automation and AI, I think will really go a long way in improving the employee experience as well.
Brilliant. That's some really interesting points that you made there. And I've taken some notes. I might come back to them later. I want to ask one more question and come back to leadership here. You spoke about how the employee experience has become more of a focus now for leaders since COVID, which is great. Yeah. In what ways would you say the priorities for employee experience have evolved then over the past few years?
Yeah, I think you alluded to the context. Like, the context has shifted so much over the past couple of years. You had COVID, you had post-COVID, you had the Great Resignation, you had silent quitting, you know, you had all these different, and I still think we're in a state of flux. If you take Lewin's change model, we certainly haven't, we're not frozen again, or you know, it's freeze and unfreeze. We're still in a state of flux. There's still that power struggle between employees and leaders. But definitely, I think after the aftermath of all these different incidents, the leaders are reading the context and know that it's time to change. Some of the emergence of around in employee experience that we're seeing is mental health, well-being obviously has moved up the agenda. If you looked at an agenda probably in 2016, 2017, that probably wouldn't be there, you know. Absolutely, purpose and value and connecting with the organization. Again, a few years ago was probably, I want to do interesting work and I want to work for a cool company with a cool brand. Now it's like, I want to really, you know, get in touch with the purpose of the business, and I want to, you know, ensure it's the right business that I want to associate myself. It's a very different kind of offering. I think also listening. You can see the emergence within employee technology. It's all around listening tools and listening to the employees. And I think that's really, really important. It's an important part of component of communication. And then flexibility, absolutely. Flexibility about how we work, where we work, when we work. That's really emerging as well within employee experience. So I think, I'm not saying that it's all sorted, as in there's a real push and pull between leaders, but they understand that the agenda items are changing. Well-being's up there. They need to communicate. They need to listen. They need to provide flexibility. Communication needs to be more open and democratized. So they're moving and emerging, but it's definitely a different agenda. If you looked at the employee experience agenda in 2016, 2017, it would have been about benefits, cool benefits, working for a cool brand, doing cool stuff and working on, whereas it's really different now, you know. But it is good news that the leaders do see it and organizations do see it's changed.
Yeah. As you were speaking there, it appeared to me that the existential crisis we went through, like, forced people to recognize what is truly important and then look to seek that in their work lives as well. So it's led to some positive shifts.
Oh yeah, but you know, what I would say is, I think that, you know, the different cycles we've had, and I don't know if you've noticed this now, and you know, I just see it emerging up. People saying, gosh, I'm busier now than I've ever been. So they had COVID, they stopped. It was a little bit of an emergence after COVID, but now people feel that it's busier than they've ever been, you know, and it's really, really manic. And I think that's interesting, because that's another signpost, I think, for the next emergence, which will be, I believe, with the generational shift as well within the workplace, probably a definite reset on, you know, not just, all work and no play. It'll definitely be, I'm working to just provide for my life rather than working, putting work at the top of the agenda. So I think that'll be another interesting shift, and it's just on the horizon.
Sure. Interesting times ahead.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thanks, Jillian. I just want to mention again, if any of you have any questions that pop up for you while we're chatting, please pop them in the Q&A box, and we'll set aside some time towards the end to come to as many as we can. I'm going to move on now. So far we've been chatting about this profound impact of the employee experience on business performance, and we've spoken about the role that mental health and well-being plays, the critical role. We've mentioned already some of the compelling research that really supports this relationship, but I wanted to spend just a few minutes looking at some of the actual science and psychological mechanisms behind this relationship. I find it interesting. Hopefully you find it relatively interesting. And if you look at this diagram here, what you'll notice is the integral role of human needs. But let's start on the left-hand side here with the employee experience, which, as you know by now, involves all elements of the work experience for the employee. Now, at every touch point of that employee experience, be it onboarding or reading of the policy or leadership communication or manager interactions, it turns out our brains are subconsciously evaluating whether our fundamental human needs, so needs such as safety and belonging and autonomy and respect and mattering, etc., these needs are being fulfilled or not. Like, I almost see this as a subconscious assessment of whether our humanity is being acknowledged and honored in our work environment or not. Now, what science and research shows, neuroscience research, depending on whether these needs are met or not, our brain triggers a reward or a threat response. With the former, the reward leading to a positive cascade across emotions, and then mindset, as you can see in the slide here, and then behaviors, ultimately all enhancing engagement and well-being. And this in turn enhances performance. But with a threat response, when these needs are not met, it triggers a negative cascading effect. So negative emotions such as, let's say, fear and shame and anger, and then a negative mindset or negative perception of the leader or the company, which leads to negative behavior such as disengagement and resisting and moving away from, and ultimately damaging well-being and engagement and performance. We also know that with that reward response, we have beneficial chemicals like DHEA and serotonin and oxytocin being released, and those foster creativity and resilience and problem solving. But with the threat response, we know that we're flooded with cortisol. If this goes on for too long, negative consequences, not only on our health, but also rigid thinking, burnout, not being able to get into flow state, and so on. And so we take all this into consideration. We can start to understand why there is this positive association in the research between well-being and performance. And really it's because feeling valued as a human being and being healthy and well, it impacts our brain and our physiology in a way that makes us trust and think well and have energy and want to connect and want to engage. And not being valued and feeling stressed out or burnt out, it does the opposite. But as we know by now, these concepts aren't just theoretical, they're evident in the real world. And I think a good example is the Fortune Best 100 companies. And these are the companies which really excel in creating the environments that meet these human needs and that have great employee experience. They're the top 100 companies when it comes to employees that trust in their leaders, where employees feel cared for and valued, where employees enjoy healthy work-life balance, and where they experience a sense of belonging. Those are the key factors. And when you compare the performance of those top 100 companies to the rest of the market, based on 2022 data, we see that employee discretionary effort is 70% higher than other companies. Turnover is 50% lower. And then what we see is that these companies, during 2022, they grew 7% during 2022 versus a 1.4% decline in the market. And those companies outperformed the market by 16.5% during the pandemic versus the rest of the market, which showed that they were resilient and able to navigate the crisis better than other organizations. So I guess to repeat, this remarkable performance of these top companies Based on this data, the suggestion here is that this can be attributed to the fulfillment of human needs across the employee experience, which should be clear by now, significantly boosts well-being and performance. And although all of these aspects of the employee experience make a difference, I do think at the heart of these dynamics are relationships, and particularly leadership and manager relationships with employees. But I'll pause there, as I know Jillian will probably have more to say on that a bit later on. And I'll stop sharing the screen. And Jillian, do you have any questions to ask with the back of that?
Yeah. And that was great. Thank you. Really, really enjoyed that. One of the things that came up for me when I was looking at it is, do you think, because I agree with everything that you've put there, but do you think that there is an onus on us as adults like that? You know, you will get the argument that I have an onus of responsibility on myself to come to work, to be, you know, the best I can be, look after myself, and putting that sort of responsibility on organizations. Is it a bit much? Is it like, oh good God, we have to, you know, nearly we'll be cooking the dinner for them at night now when they go home, you know, that kind of way? Is it like borderline, you know, just a bit much? And by the way, I agree with you, but I need to position that, because you would get the people saying that, you know.
Yeah, and I think it's a really like valid question and a valid challenge. And when that is happening, it's an example of like the wrecking ball effect of swinging too far in either direction. It inevitably causes problems, and then we swing back in the other direction and cause the problems and so on. So I would say yes, as adults, there's definitely a personal responsibility to look after our own mental health, 100%. This is an important part of being a self-aware and a proactive individual, right? And we all have I would say, a duty to ourselves and to others to engage in self-care, to seek help when we need it, and to try to establish boundaries to protect our mental and emotional well-being. So I think that's really important, and we should take responsibility for that to the degree that we are able to. However, this doesn't negate the role of the organization, and it doesn't negate the role of managers in supporting mental health. I'm not sure if you came across recent research a few months back, which showed that for 70% of employees, one's manager has more of an impact on their mental health than their therapist. So it shows you that, you know, something's going on there. We know that the workplace significantly impacts our daily lives. We spend a major part of our lives at work. And this affects our stress levels, our emotional state, and our overall health. And we know that the environment that we are in is supremely important. You know, we often use the analogy at Unmind of, you could put an acorn in a bowl of sand, but if it doesn't have the right conditions, you know, sunlight and rain and healthy soil, it's not going to flourish into an oak tree. And you know, the same thing can be said of human beings in an organization. It needs the right organizational factors and support and so on. So really, I think it's a both and thing, and it's beneficial for both the employee and the organization to view mental health as this shared responsibility between the employee and the organization. So that's how I think of it.
I'm just writing that down because I like that shared responsibility. I think that's very important. I just have one more question, if you don't mind. What type of leaders do you believe we need for the future? You know, and do you think there's a role for on-site organizational psychologists? I mean, again, you know, you think it's a lot on people leaders and people managers. You know, would we benefit from on-site organizational psychologists, or what type of, when you look into the future, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, what does a good leader look like to deal in this new context? Sure. Long question.
I mean, I think in line with what we've been speaking about today, I'd say the future needs leaders who are empathetic, definitely adaptive and visionary, inclusive, collaborative, ethical. So effectively, they deeply value and seek to nurture the human beings within their organization. So I often talk about this analogy or this difference in paradigm. I would hope that future leaders are those that really realize that organizations aren't machines, that they are ecosystems made up of human beings with human needs. And when those human needs are met and honored, they and the organization flourishes. So I think that's really important. And that's what I would hope we move towards on a wider scale. in terms of there being a place for organizational psychologists, well, I can actually speak from personal experience here, because at Unmind, I'm lucky enough to have an organizational psychologist, a clinical psychologist, and a positive psychologist in my wellbeing strategy team. And I know this is not the norm, right? And we are a mental health company, but it means we have a wealth of deep and broad expertise to draw on when it comes to understanding the needs of our employees and creating our wellbeing strategy. And it certainly makes a big difference. So yes, I think organizational psychologists can be a significant asset in supporting leaders and ensuring that organizations are able to thrive and flourish as healthy, human-centric ecosystems. So definitely really important. That being said, I don't think we should fall into the same trap as we sometimes have with HR, right? Where we leave it to them to deal with the soft people stuff. As I've said a few times, it's leadership and management that do really play critical roles, and this is it's where they truly value employee. Well, when I say leaders and managers play a critical role, they can do so by truly valuing employee well-being, and they do that by making it a strategic imperative in that organization, by role modeling empathy, to come back to what I said at the beginning, respect in relationships, and all of that stuff. So yes, I think mental health experts can play an important role, organizational psychologists an important role, but still we need leaders and managers to really lean into this more human-centric way of showing up. So I think it's a good time probably to hand over to you for the final part of our presentation, before we then open for questions from everyone on the call. So I think I will share the screen again. Sound good?
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Cool. There we are.
Brilliant. Thank you. So I wanted to share two aspects of employee experience that I believe are truly, truly important and play a huge role in the employee experience and employee well-being. So the first one there is human connection. And obviously, Steve, you talked about it there as well. But when we think about human connection, recently there was an organizational psychologist who is challenging Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And I do tend to agree with her, because when you think about it, in the pyramid, physiological needs are first, then it's safety and security, and then love and belonging. But really, in truth, if you think about it, if you did have food and water and safety, but you had no human connection and no belonging, I don't think you would survive very long. It is absolutely critical to, human beings to have that connection and to be socially accepted. Years ago in tribes, that was how they dealt with outliers. They would exclude them from the tribe, and that was kind of the worst punishment known. So really, really important human connection. I think when I talk about that, everyone nods their head and everybody is in full agreement, And part of that obviously then is relationship skills, because you need relationship skills in order to have connection. But I would, ask people in the audience to consider how often at senior leadership level or meetings that they're at, how often do we talk about relationships, how the quality of the relationships within our organization are? And generally the answer is no. When I put that out to executive teams and SLTs, they don't actually talk about, are the quality of our relations, are they improving? Are they any better or any worse than they were this time last year? How are the interdepartmental relationships? How are we as an SLT in our relationships? When I look at OD strategies or L&D strategies, they generally have, we need to keep up technological pace. They're looking at AI courses, Excel, data, analytics, lots of different things to keep up with the pace of change. But really, the core skill for the future is going to be relational intelligence and relationship skills. And we really have to start investing in organizations and thinking about it and putting it down as an agenda. If you think about it, there was a stat I read recently, which I found unbelievable, but very normal at the same time, which is 65% of startups fail due to relational issues between co-founders. Like, that's 65% of organizations that before they get out of the gates, they're failing because of relationships. And yourself, there's no amount of money, no amount of benefits or free food or money that's going to make you stay in a toxic environment with toxic relationships. So really, really important. The other thing in research, and a lot of people probably on this have seen the various TED Talks, where the quality of the relationships in your life has, an impact on your health and the quality of your life. It's directly related to relationships from a work concept. it's directly related to the success, your success within the business, and the quality of your work. So again, I would point to the fact that it's hugely important for organizations to focus on this and to give it consideration. They tend to, a lot of the time, as we just said, they are soft skills. We tend to say, you know, these skills are the hard skills, relationship and all that. And people even do the movement of, you know, soft skills. I think we need to rebrand it critical skills. They are the critical skills for now, and they're the critical skills for the future. And another interesting stat, and quite a sad stat that I read recently, is 69% of employees aren't satisfied with the opportunities to connect in their organization. And nearly half of millennials and Gen Z report feeling lonely, and 22% of them don't have a friend at work. So why does that matter? Bar on a human level, I think that's actually quite sad that, you know, people don't have, you know, 22%, a quarter do not have friends in work and are not feeling connected. The other things that I talked about, it's important because it actually improves the quality of work. It improves, you know, productivity in work, and it actually, you know, improves the bottom line. And that is, like, relationships are going to be the new bottom line into the future. So it's very, very important that organizations give it consideration, not only on a profitability and a success level, but also on a human level as well. I think it's really, really important. Then I'm going to talk about communication. Because communication, and I know there'll be people on this call, and I deal with lots of organizations, and whenever the engagement survey comes out or any surveys, they're literally hitting their head off the wall. They think they've done so much for communication, you know, and there's always, no, they don't score well on communication. It is a big challenge for organizations. It's a big challenge for people, but it is really, really important to a successful employee experience strategy, you know. So I've put some stats up there and you can read them yourself around poor communication, but 54% of remote workers reporting poor communication impacts trust in leadership. And that's really, really important for an organization. Improved internal communications can improve organizational productivity by as much as 25%. So again, really, really interesting and important stuff for anybody who's trying to get organizations to invest in communications or to give it the attention that it actually needs. I think it's a no-brainer really, but I am going to say it. Effective communication improves engagement, productivity, increases retention, and facilitates trust. And poor communication leads to burnout, stress, attrition, and a financial toll on an organization. I do believe that organizations have gotten worse post-pandemic. I think in the pandemic, it actually gave organizations a good structure to, you know, update weekly on what was happening. And we got into a rhythm within organizations on communicating on a regular basis and updating people on where things are. But I think that has actually, we've disimproved over time and lost some of the good capabilities we developed during COVID. Another piece I think organizations get wrong on communications is a big part of communication isn't just top-down communications, it's listening. That's a really important component. They need to listen to their employees. And the other area I feel at the moment organizations can make a big difference is understanding the generational differences. And how, you know, we have lots of different generations in our workplaces now. We're really starting to see that. And from a personalization perspective, organizations really need to consider this. I mean, if you consider Gen X and millennials, they like to email, text and phone. Gen Zs, you know, want instant messaging. So even on comm strategies, you know, you're going to have different comm strategies to, you know, communicate with all the different generations. But final point is it's critical to employee well-being and mental health, and it's really important to foster an open communication environment within your organization. So
amazing. Lots of interesting stuff there. I've taken a bunch of notes, but share some of my takeaways a little bit towards the end. Yeah. I'm looking at the time, Jillian. We've got about 17 minutes. Shall we move on to some audience Q&A and then come back to?
Sure. Yeah. Can't believe we've only 17.
No. Okay.
Well, they're two good talkers, or.
So, Jillian, can you see the questions there?
I can't. Sorry. Ooh.
Otherwise, I can ask it to you. I think the first one is for you, I would say.
Yeah. Do you think we consider? Oh, absolutely. I think totally reframing. HR, absolutely. I think doesn't encapsulate employee experiences. You know, much more relevant, and people and culture and all of those type of things. Sometimes I feel if you put culture.
Jillian? Sorry to interrupt. If you could just read the question out. I don't think our audience can see the question.
Thank you. So the question I'm answering, sorry, is do you think we should reconsider renaming the HR department into something less about being a resource to something more like employee experience? So absolutely, I do. And I think that incorporating employee experience would be fabulous. Even chief people teams and people having any sort of anything other than human resources in the title, I think would benefit. And I think there's a rethink for sure on the role. I think HR have really, during COVID, their importance really accelerated. But now post-COVID, it feels like everything is being handed over to HR at the moment. Every kind of thing where can't find a home for it is being handed over to HR, and it's quite a wide agenda that they're being handed, where really, that my point about the AI would be brilliant if we could automate a lot of that stuff and give them free time to do what they want to do most, which is help people, support people, and work with people to help them get their work done and support them, So yeah, so I definitely do. I agree with you. That was a very long-winded answer.
Great. Thank you, Jillian. I see a question here, and perhaps we both answer this, but I'll start. And the question is, a lot of organizations are in a state of flux themselves from a business results perspective. Can they still provide a safe space based on that? So I think it's a great question. And I would say if the safe that you're talking about, or the safety that you're talking about, is one that refers to absolute certainty in the future and no discomfort, et cetera, then no, we certainly can't guarantee that kind of safe space. However, even within this demanding, high-pressure environment, what I do think we should guarantee is a psychologically safe space. And that is a space where people are able to share their honest perspectives, to express dissent, to be themselves without fear of getting into trouble because of it or being reprimanded, etc. So we can still create that kind of psychological safety, which invites people to be vulnerable and to be able to share when they are struggling, etc., etc. And I think the way that we create that kind of safe space is where leaders themselves lean into that themselves, and speak about their own vulnerabilities and their own challenges and the like. So we can't guarantee safety in terms of total comfort and that there's not going to be challenges and problems in the future. 100% not, but I do think we can guarantee, or that we should guarantee, psychological safety. I don't know if you think of it any differently, Jillian?
No, I think of it the exact same. And I think, with psychological safety, communication is a key component to that. And I think sometimes where it comes under threat is where leaders feel they don't have the answers, or they don't actually have anything to update on. Keeping people informed and update, even when you don't know the answers, is actually more helpful than no communication through difficult times. So it's always communication to the power of 10. Even if you don't have an answer, it's getting on, saying, look, we don't have all the answers, but as soon as we do, we will tell you what they are. So I think communication when organizations are in flux is really, really helpful for maintaining that good organizational safety once it's in place. But yeah, aligned with everything you said, Steve. Yeah.
Great. I see one here which I don't mind answering. Shall I go?
Yeah.
The question is, do you agree with the recommendations from the National Institute for Health and Care Excellence on embedding mental health and wellbeing support of employees in line managers' job descriptions and performance reviews? I would say I do agree with that, given how important the relationship between a manager and employees is, first of all. However, we can't just embed it into their job descriptions and performance reviews without actually supporting managers to be able to create mentally healthy cultures within their teams, right? And to be able to support their people. So this requires manager training, manager development, to be able to do that. So it's both of those things. However, to recognize the distinction between a manager being able to show up in ways that is beneficial for the mental health and well-being of their people and being a therapist. We don't expect managers to become psychologists or therapists, certainly not. But just to understand how to show up in ways that are human, that lean into empathy and compassion and respect and dignity, and et cetera, et cetera. And I think we can help to train managers to do that better. And I do think making it a part of their performance reviews and job descriptions would be a constructive way to, I guess, move this forward. So in a long-winded way, I agree, but it requires both education and support. Jillian, do you have any ones that you would like to answer?
I did. The one that jumped out at me here, the thoughts on managing change fatigue in a business, be it change of management, systems, process, teams, etc. Actually just wrote an article recently on that because, you know, that's absolutely what is coming out in engagement surveys worldwide, that people are becoming exhausted with the volume of change, because externally they're dealing with a lot of change as well. You know, you go into a shop now, they're changing technologies. Everywhere you go, things are changing. But organizations, I think, are not considering the volume of change that any one person is dealing with at any one time, because the larger the organization gets, there's different departments having their change agenda and what they want to get through. So yes, I agree. That's definitely a factually correct statement. People are getting exhausted with change. That is not a good thing for organizations, because what will happen is people will just stop changing, or they won't take things seriously, particularly if it's not being implemented correctly. So my advice to organizations is, again, having an agenda item where you understand how much change is happening within your organization, how effective is the change that's taken place. A lot of times I don't think we're assessing that, and we're not assessing how much each individual team or person is dealing with at one time. So I think organizations need to become more mindful of monitoring that and the effectiveness of the change that they're trying to implement. But good shout, because all research is pointing that there is a real case of change fatigue.
Brilliant. Okay, I see a question here. What other roles do you think are critical in supporting well-being in large organizations? So we've spoken about the role of leaders and managers. Obviously, people, teams, and HR play crucial roles. But the answer I'll give is that every single person in that organization plays an important role in the well-being of that organization. So at Unmind, we talk about the whole person, whole organization approach. And I really do think, to come back to one of the questions from earlier around personal responsibility and organizational responsibility and being a both and thing, I really think that we all should take responsibility for our own well-being, for the well-being of others, and for co-creating a space and the culture that respects the human in each other and helps each other to be healthy and well. So my answer is really that we all play an important role. We probably have one or two more questions, or no, actually 1 or 2 more minutes for probably one last question before we start to wrap up. So Jillian, is there a question here that jumps out at you that you would like to answer?
How do you think the team authentic self plays a role in employee? I constantly see associates afraid to be their true self. So sorry, I'm sorry, I was reading it there to myself, but how do you think the term authentic self plays a role in employee well-being? I constantly see associates afraid to be their true self, and I feel like this is terrible for well-being. Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. I can't imagine going into a workplace for, as you said, 8-9 hours a day and not being yourself, and not being able to share pieces of yourself. I think, it goes without saying, again, leaders and anyone involved in employee experience has to allow for the environment and facilitate that piece where people can be themselves, to show their own vulnerability and show that it's okay to be vulnerable, to show who they are and be themselves. And because a lot of times when you are in organizations, people come in and for the first couple of weeks, they are looking intently to see, how do I behave in here? How do I fit in? Are people, they're observing. So it's really, really important that we create and showcase and role model that it's okay for people to be themselves. So yeah, I couldn't agree more. Going into a workplace and not being yourself, or feeling that you couldn't be yourself, is a really unhealthy space to be in. And I would say that there's a lot of people probably going into workplaces probably experiencing that today. I think there's a lot of organizations that say that, you know, they're very inclusive, but then actually what you see is the behavior is quite in opposition to that. So I think it's important for people when they're doing the research and going in for new jobs to do your research correctly and make sure that organizations are true to themselves, because yeah, it can have a detrimental effect on your well-being.
Fantastic. Brilliant. Okay, great. So we've got about 6 minutes left. Thank you all for your questions. I know we didn't get to all of them, but hopefully we're able to share some useful insights. Before we move on, Morven, I've first of all, hello. And Morven, I saw your question in the chat about citing some of the research and the stats. I'm sure myself or the team can maybe email you afterwards and share that with you. So we'll certainly do that. So I guess as we start to near the end of this webinar, Jillian and I thought it would be nice for each of us to share our key 3 takeaways from the session. So Jillian, do you want to go first? Do you have 3 key takeaways, or would you like me to go first?
Yeah, no, I'll go first. I was writing. I hope I can read my writing, because I was trying to, it's actually not an easy task to be asking questions, presenting, and trying to take
Exactly. And doing slides.
like multitasking. So please bear with me. So the first one I has is respect the human in each other. I really like that, respect the human in each other, because like you said at the start, we can be very transactional. I'd even see my kids when I come in from work sometimes, you know, when you're in the mode of getting tasks done, and then I come in and go, what's the story here? Have you got your homework done? And I'm in task, and then they kind of bring me back to my humanity and say, Mommy, you know, and you go, oh God, yeah, you know, and you go back to yourself about the human part. So I really, really liked that. Fulfillment of human needs across the employee experience. I think that's, again, a really important piece that resonated with me, because again, sometimes you think of the components like recognition, you know, and you go through, but it's actually the fulfillment of human needs across the employee experience. And then the other thing was that I liked the shared responsibility. And I think that's really, really true. It's never just the onus on the organization, that we have to take responsibility for ourselves and the organization. So for employee well-being and mental health, it's ourself and the organization. So it's a shared responsibility. And the final thing is make it a strategic imperative. So they were
Great. Brilliant. Thanks, Jillian. So mine were, I think, first of all, just that it seems simple, but I think we often confuse it too, but recognizing that engagement is the outcome of employee experience, and that great engagement and high engagement is the outcome of a great employee experience. And so that's where the focus should be. Then your point around needing to hire leaders and managers with high relational intelligence being really important, and not just having an IC, become a manager who doesn't have the capacity or the willingness to want to really support their people, and relational intelligence being a key skill of the future. So that stood out for me. And then the third one, just the point pretty much that we are social creatures wired to connect. And that this, I think, has to be a core focus for organizations, and it's essential for well-being, essential for employee experience, essential performance. And then that statement you said about relationships being the new bottom line of the future, I think those things really stood out for me. So I guess thank you everyone for joining us today. I hope you've enjoyed this webinar, and if you'd like to know more about our respective companies, Unmind and Workvivo, I'm going to share my screen quickly, because here are some QR codes that you can scan to find out more. So give me a second. There we are. So you can see that. Jillian, I guess just I just want to say it's been a real pleasure hosting this with you. I know you've just shared your 3 takeaways, but any final words before we wrap up?
No, I really enjoyed it, Steve. Thanks so much. I've learned loads, and it's always great to do these things to reset and remind yourself again about the importance of human connection and what work is all about, which is people and relationships. And yeah, so really enjoyed it. Thanks so much.
Fantastic. I echo all of that. So yeah, I wish you all a good rest of your week. Thanks again for joining us. And I guess to all of the people out there, let's keep talking about this stuff. And, I would love if we help to bring more dignity, more respect, and more joy and more humanity to the world of work. So yeah, thanks everyone, and enjoy the rest of your week, and hopefully see you at the next webinar. Cheers.
Thanks. Bye.